What will be the fallout from the New Zealand shooting? Who will the Democrats nominate to take on President Trump in 2020? Will Fox distance itself from Trump after the Disney merger? And find out what the media missed in our most underreported stories of the week. I'm Heather Godwin, and this is The Square Circle. Hello and welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Heather Godwin. Joining us today are conservative writer and editor Brian McNicoll, political reporter James Rosen, and Kelley Vlahos of the American Conservative. Welcome, everyone. A tragic mass shooting occurred on Friday at two mosques in New Zealand. Now the country is poised to enact stricter gun control measures. Here's the Prime Minister.
The terror attack in Christchurch on Friday was the worst act of terrorism on our shores. It was, in fact, one of the worst globally in recent times. It has exposed a range of weaknesses in New Zealand's gun laws.
Kelley Vlahos with American Conservative. Do you think she'll be successful with this measure?
I really do. I mean, I haven't seen any hint of opposition in New Zealand. They are obviously a nation in shock right now. From what I understand, they had among the lowest gun control, or not gun control, but gun violence rates in the world, right? So, but they also have the highest rates of gun ownership. I understand per capita. They have 1.2 to 1.5 million gun owners out of 5 million people in the country. So it is a country of gun owners, mostly hunters who are carrying firearms for recreation and sport. That is, they maintain these low gun violence records. It'll be interesting to see if banning the assault rifles, or what they call military assault rifles, will have any effect on future attacks. Their neighbor, Australia, has instituted very tight gun control laws after their own mass shooting incidents, and they claim that they have stopped, or they've lowered the number of mass shootings and attacks. So, there are gun owner proponents who say that the correlation between gun ownership and heavy gun laws and these mass shooting attacks, there is no correlation. In fact, that responsible gun owners are not the ones that are committing the crimes. Criminals who get the guns, or in this case, convert the weapons to military full automatic weapons, are the ones that are causing the crime. So that debate will continue. I don't see this being as big of a contentious controversy as it is in our country in terms of these laws, because they are a nation in shock. They've never experienced this heinous of a crime before. So I think the laws will be passed. They're free to do it. They're a sovereign nation. It'll be, the question is, will it stop the next attack? We don't know.
Brian, do you have an opinion?
There's an astonishingly emotional reaction to an unfortunate crime, just to make a major societal change. This is a gun culture. It's not just hunting. It's a lot of times it's protection. A lot of these people live in the wild, so to speak, and all kinds of beasts come upon them. And in fact, they're already talking about carving out some exceptions to this for people who live in remote areas. There's some other exceptions on, they're going to get down and define what is an automatic or semi-automatic, and so there's a lot of lobbying left to be done. I think by the time that's over, it'll be hewed down some. But she's announced that this is the case immediately, and then we will pass the laws, which is that's an extraordinary whatever you think of gun laws, and most you look at a map of homicides per 1,000 people versus gun laws, the more guns are allowed, the lower the murder rate is all over the world, here, everywhere, because, you can't, get at people. The other people are armed too. You have to show respect. And she's, she's getting ready to like pull off a major public policy. It would be impossible to do that here because, what she's doing runs afoul of the Second Amendment.
And your opinion, Mr. Rosen?
Well, it makes me recall by comparison the tragic mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, and President Obama was in office then, and I think we saw him at his most emotional. He came into the White House briefing room, I was there, and he teared up. It was maybe the only time in his presidency, and I don't think it was staged. I think it was real, because kids, he had young daughters at the time, and kids had been killed, and I think that the commentators in the United States were saying, this is, if gun control is going to pass, serious gun control law is going to pass, it's going to be now. I think people thought that was a breakthrough moment, ended up not being. New Zealand is a gun culture, looks like a breakthrough moment. I think it's not quite as much of a gun culture as the United States, so I think there's more of a chance of a breakthrough there in laws, but I think we should wait and see.
The other thing is, here, the reason that we have the Second Amendment is not so everybody could go hunting, right? It was an anti-tyranny measure, so it's built into the American system of governance in a way that it's not elsewhere.
I'd like to ask Brian just a very quick question.
Okay.
Way more guns in the United States than in, pick a country, Germany or France. I believe there's a significantly higher murder rate in the United States than Germany or France. So I'm just wondering where your statistic comes from. That more guns, lower the murder rate.
I saw the map.
But do you think France or Germany have a higher murder?
I was reading this yesterday. Now I will go find it, but I'll get it to you.
That would be something. That would be big news if they do.
Because it was eye-popping, the correlation between, the more people who had guns, the less the murder rate was.
Well, and sadly, just to add, it's just as a provocative aside, that I've been seeing a lot of complaints and fears over knife attacks in places like Britain, where they have no guns. And I just saw a headline the other day that officials are cracking down on knife violence. So I think it's more of a societal issue. What is behind the violence itself, and can we get at that as a society, rather than getting rid of the weapon of choice?
Well, that's a really good point, because almost immediately they started talking about the correlation between this particular shooter and his enthusiasm from the United States movement with the white nationalists becoming more popular. How do you think that's going to affect the worldwide point of view?
Well, nationalism has been on the rise in much of the country, particularly in Western Europe and in the United States, for several years now. I have my own
sort of a thing to claw back sovereignty, like Brexit, tear out of the European Union. There's been a lot of strict borders. People, Hungary, Austria, Italy, France, yeah, they're getting.
Jeffrey Sachs'
they're winning elected.
book some years ago at Harvard, economist at Harvard, predicted this. He said globalism is going to unleash these forces. People are going to lose their jobs. There's going to be a lot more economic insecurity, and I think we're seeing some of that.
So globalism, you think, is the?
Well, I think it's globalism has unleashed these forces that have left a significant portion of our population behind in terms of jobs and mobility. And I think what you're seeing now is a valid response to that is what you just mentioned with France and Hungary and Italy starting to close their borders, getting away from the EU, not wanting these sort of blanket control coming from Brussels. But then you have these extremists on the far end who take it too far, and they have a visceral response against the immigrants that they see as causing all of their problems. And I feel like you have these valid issues about globalism and Brexit and Brussels and the EU that are being hijacked by more extremists in this case.
All right. Well, thank you. I'd like to remind our viewers that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, or via Facebook or Twitter. And we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. Also this week, the 2020 presidential race got a little more crowded as Beto O'Rourke announced his candidacy. He joins 12 other official candidates and several more who are expected to throw their hats into the ring. So, Brian McNicoll, I'm curious about Bernie Sanders and how he's going to come out of this race.
Here's the thing. So today in Rasmussen, Trump is at 49%. He's been between 48 and 52 for months now. That's where he is.
But Rasmussen's been wrong consistently in
Well,
favoring Trump for years
very
now.
bullish.
Several years.
Here's the thing.
Okay, well, let me answer the question.
Zogby says Rasmussen's polls are the best other than his.
Okay.
So, I mean,
And it would sound like they're very good.
Okay, and the other thing is he's the only one doing daily presidential tracking.
Okay.
Okay, so, and now Real Clear Politics is saying it's like 45. So if he's off, he's not off much.
Okay.
So that's not quite half. Okay, the problem is, so there's 51 or 52 against him, right? If there's 48 or 49 for him, there's 51 or 52 against him. But they are all, they're not united behind any candidate or thing, right? So now, how is that split out is the question. And I think Bernie is, to answer your question, a sizable part of that other 51. Enough to win, I don't know. But I think when you say, okay, who is going to be around in this race 6 months or a year from now, right? Who's still, there's 15 declared, and there's a bunch guys like Biden who, are going to declare who have not done it quite yet, right? So you're going to be upwards of 20 people by the time this start. Actually, we get to debates and get serious about it. So of those 15 or 20 people, who has the money, name recognition, the policy chops, the gravitas to still be there, leaving Trump out of the question, because whoever it is, the Democrats say, I think about 75 or 80% of them say the number one thing they're looking for in a candidate is ability to beat Trump, right? They don't care what they're for or against if they can beat Trump. So that's how they're thinking about it. So can he be one of those top 3 or 4 a year from now? Yeah, I think he probably will be. I think Harris will be. She's impressive. She has a lot of people for her. She's also quietly sort of trying to present herself as a middle ground, right? She is sort of taking herself off the left edge a little bit. Like they all said Medicare for all. Yeah, Medicare. Wait, not quite for all. Let's talk about how to make this happen. Can we make it out of the remnants of Obamacare? Can we, So I think she has staying power. I think he has staying power. I don't think Biden does. They're pinning their hopes on Biden now.
That's interesting.
He's run 3 times, right? And he didn't get out of the first time. He's a 1 or 2% guy all 3 times. So, I don't know. I don't think he's.
What do you think, James?
Well, I think the Democrats are schizoid right now, as they've been at other times in the past. I think although they're saying the most important thing is to beat Trump, we're seeing rifts among the potential candidates, and we're hearing different things. I personally have talked with a handful of Democrats who I know in recent weeks, and they will start off by saying, most important thing is to beat Trump. But then if you delve a little bit deeper, they start saying contradictory things. I've talked with a couple women, for instance, who, when I have suggested that I think that the ticket that might have the best chance of beating Trump, and I think it's Biden and Beto, they're like, oh no, can't have an all-white male ticket, can't have an all-white male ticket. And then others, women friends of mine have said, need to have a woman. So I think beneath the surface of got to beat Trump, there's fissures, and I think they're still a long way from playing out. I agree that Kamala Harris is very impressive, but she's from California, the state that they need the least. That's one reason why I think Beto O'Rourke is a more likely ticket, somewhere on the ticket, because he could really help them win Texas, and that would be a huge breakthrough. That actually might help decide who wins the election.
Well, Kelley is the woman on the panel. How do you respond to that?
Well,
point of
I mean,
view?
I'm glad you said it, James, because I see the same issues, and I just caution the Democrats to go back and look at where the Republicans were at this time in the run-up to the last presidential cycle, where they were battling each other to get furthest right of center. And what happens in all of these primaries is they go as far to their party's extreme to try to please their party base, and then have to claw their way back to the center once somebody is nominated. And so you get a lot of, in the case of the Democrats, you're seeing a lot of identity politics. You're seeing a lot of anti-Trump. Everything is about Trump is a racist. Trump is pro-Russian. They're bringing up the Mueller. They are promising things that sound socialist to the rest of the country. And so I fear for them, I mean, just as a political commentator, that they will do the same thing that the Republicans do. They will fight for that base and then be lost on how to reach out to the general population. In the case of the Republicans, they did not see Trump coming because he was able to appeal to that, I want to say center, but to that American voter who was tired of these identity politics and the pandering on both sides, and just wanted to know, how are you gonna find me a job? How am I going to get through the next mortgage payment? How am I going to be proud about my country again? And somehow he was able to speak to those people. And meanwhile, the Ted Cruzes and Marco Rubio are flailing around trying to play catch up. And I have a feeling, I don't know who on the Democratic side might be that Trump. It might be somebody we don't even know yet. It could be Andrew Yang, for all we know.
But freedom dividend.
Right, but I think that Bernie Sanders probably is the most schooled in this area because he's gone through this before, and he does have appeal to both young people, older people, and he appeals to the working class voter. There are plenty of people who are going to vote for him and ended up voting for Trump. I can't tell you how many there were, but there were plenty of people that I talked to anecdotally that they just didn't want Hillary. They thought that Bernie talked to that sense of the anti-Wall Street, everyman voter, woman voter, and they went for Trump because they saw him as, the anti-establishment candidate. So he was tapping into something. I don't know if he can do that again, but I think that's what they need to get those voters in the Rust Belt that helped get Trump over that edge and on the electoral college. So
okay, the one thing I'll say about this is some ideas, because I see on these Republican things on the internet or whatever, these guys are going around saying they're socialists and they're for all these crazy things. They'll never win like that. It's like, the ideas that were way out of the window are moving into the window. So you can't assume that what was way too crazy to pass muster 5 years ago still is, right? The electorate's changing.
that's
And
true.
the Democrats have a history of choosing unelectable weak candidates. George McGovern, Michael Dukakis,
Mondale.
Mondale. Well, how can I forget
So he didn't even remember.
And I think you could argue that really they've only chosen, since Jack Kennedy, 50, almost 60 years ago, they've only chosen two really strong candidates with broad appeal, and that was Bill Clinton and Barack Obama.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, thank you. We've got to move on. And finally, with the Disney merger with Fox now approved, questions are swirling about Fox News' relationship with President Trump, including tensions between the network's opinion hosts and its news division. James Rosen, what have you got to say about that?
well, there's a lot of factors at play. The Disney deal just closed for Disney to acquire not Fox News, but to acquire 21st Century Fox, which is the entertainment division, the very large division of the Fox Corporation. And I think that matters because with the resources and the revenues that 21st Century Fox brings in, the rest of the Fox Corporation is going to be financially weaker. But I think there's a lot of other important factors playing in. One is that over the last 2 years, I mean, when President Trump started running for office, Fox News had more viewers than CNN or MSNBC combined. That gap has substantially narrowed now, and
Because of MSNBC, not
because of CNN. Okay.
CNN is,
Oh, is that the case?
yeah, CNN is getting crushed.
But Fox News still is not the dominant force that it was, and also Vanity Fair had a very interesting article recently, quoting sources inside Fox, saying that Lackland, Murdoch, the son of Rupert Murdoch, of course, one of the founders of Fox. Lackland is CEO. He has more. Rupert has ceded day-and-day control to Lackland, and they quoted insiders at Fox as saying that Lackland does not like Trump. And so I think for economic reasons, maybe for ideological reasons, Fox News is moving away. And I think also, and supposedly because of this, Sean Hannity, who of course super close friends with President Trump, talks with him several times a week, is threatening to leave Fox News when his contract expires in less than 2 years.
Yeah,
Kelley,
okay.
yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Well, this is how I see it. I mean, I think Lackland probably has the foresight of saying that, Trump is not going to be president forever. He could be president for another 4 years. But there is a lot going on in conservatism, period, right now. And I believe that as a news network, I don't think they'll become less conservative, but I think that they won't so much be hanging their hat on one guy, one president, and perhaps re-engineering to accommodate the new realities in the conservative movement, and which is not only you're pro-Trump, but you also have the more, you have your usual social conservatives, you have the libertarians, you have a whole movement that is talking about these nationalism issues. They're talking about, Main Street conservatism. They're talking about how to address these issues in the heartland. The people that were left behind, how does conservatism update to today's realities? And I think that if you're a smart conservative media organization, you are going to start seeing that it's not all about Trump and it's not all about the conservative ink of the past, but bringing in new voices, fresh voices. I hardly think they're going to turn away from the Republican Party or turn away from Trump, but maybe they're starting to think further ahead. And I think that's what you're going to see. But I don't think that they're losing viewers because of Trump. I think you have somebody in the White House. You're not the feisty opposition anymore. Right. I think these things churn and they're in cycles.
And Brian, how about you?
Well, I think the sign of what you're talking about is Paul Ryan being named to the board, kind of shows with the direction they're going as sort of the what we thought of traditionally as Republicans before Trump. I also think this whole mega war of cable news changes profoundly after the 2020 election. I think the war is largely over at that point. If they don't beat Trump then they just wait 3 years and try again, right? And I think that these ratings and Sean Hannity's place in the world and so forth, a lot less intensity and tension played to this once that election ends.
You don't think the Democrats are going to have 6 years of hearings on Donald Trump if they hold the House?
Well, let's certainly hope not. All right, well, let's take some questions from our viewers now. Don Coleman. Thanks, Don, for writing in. Do you think the Democrats will end up nominating a left-winger or a moderate? Who would like to take this one?
I think maybe a left-winger who acts like a moderate, who tries to sound like a moderate. And I think Beto O'Rourke's a perfect example of that. I mean, I don't really know. I think none of us know. He's kind of untested, but I don't think he's a true centrist, but I think he's already trying to recast himself as more of a centrist.
I agree with that. I also, though, the slippery pole, there's all kind of reasons people don't make it. I think he's just too weird. There's poetry and stuff that's coming out. It's like,
Hey, listen, Granddad Bernie surprised us all. So it's really.
So, you never know. But I think it'll end up being somebody who I don't think the energy in the party is on the left. It's like you're talking about Bernie. You know, I don't think it's in the middle right now. I think that those people are going against the wind.
I think people want authenticity, and I don't think that they're seeing a lot of that in the 2020 Democratic field. You brought up Beto. I don't think it's that he's weird. I just think he comes off as a little phony. He looks like sort of a, Jack Kennedy, 4.0, and still not making that mark. And I think people saw we elected Donald Trump. I think people were tired of the same old political plastic phony baloney Washington,
Talking head.
and
He is what
somebody
he is.
has to emerge that is going to fulfill that need that I think most voters have.
Great. All right. And now from Joni Garrett. Should the government prevent media outlets from publishing the New Zealand Shooters Manifesto?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No, absolutely. That's an easy free press question. Why would we do that? What do you get out of that? People want to know. They want to know how these people think. And somebody out there might get the idea, read that and say, okay, I know how to reach these people and keep them from, killing 50 people first.
Kelley, what do you think?
No, I agree entirely. I think that we don't learn our lessons if we don't examine what's under the rocks, and it's uncomfortable, it's disgusting, it's tragic, but we won't learn anything if we don't keep completely transparent. I think there has been a discussion about the decision not to release his name and not to give him posthumous publicity. And I've seen a lot of conversation of that at our magazine in the comments where people were arguing about whether his picture and his name should be flashed. And some people argued we've been flashing these guys' faces and names all over, and there's still another one around the corner. Let's try it differently. Maybe not publicize his name and see if that helps. If these guys think that they're going to get some sort of
they're not drawn to the
prominence from the
publicity
grave,
aspect of it. All right, James, and we'll get to you first next time. In fact, it's time for the most underreported story of the week. So we'll start with you.
At a youth detention center in a jail near Brownsville, Texas, one of the gentlemen who worked there was arrested the other day for stealing $1.2 million worth of fajitas. And he had a scheme going. He was ordering thousands of tons of fajitas, and then he was reselling them at a profit. And he was turned in because somebody else. There's not that many kids, it turns out, at this detention center, and he was turned in by someone else who works there, who says, we had this 800-pound order of fajitas came in. I mean, if we all ate fajitas for the next 100 years, we couldn't eat that many. So he was arrested.
Well, that's a unique one indeed. What's he going to do with millions of pounds of fajitas? All right, Brian McNicoll.
I have a jail story too, unfortunately.
All right, keep the theme going.
The Supreme Court has agreed to hear an appeal from Lee Boyd Malvo, who was one of the D.C. snipers.
Yep.
He was the young one. He was 17 when he was convicted. He's now 34. Spent half his life in prison. The Supreme Court has held that if you are convicted of a crime as a minor like that, you cannot be sentenced to life without parole. So he has some consecutive life sentences, and he has a couple of murders in Maryland that they did not prosecute him for because they were assured that he would already never get out of prison. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if the Supreme Court says that he can't have a life sentence from Virginia.
And Kelley?
Very quickly, this week, the IG Inspector Generals at the Pentagon opened an investigation into the Assistant Secretary of Defense, Patrick Shanahan, for conflict of interest. If people don't know, he spent 30 years working for Boeing, and now he's pushing for Boeing's business at the Pentagon, one of the most obvious and bold displays of the nexus of industry and the military, and we'll see what happens, but he is up for Secretary of Defense, and this might hurt his chances.
All right. Well, that's all we've got for this week. I'm Heather Godwin, and thanks for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.